Okay, so we're talking about how important it is to keep blood flow going to every organ in your body and how
Right.
nitric oxide is an essential part of that. How does okay, so how does it play out if you've kind of depleted your nitric oxide store? You've depleted your body's ability to create nitric oxide. And I'm not just talking about in terms of sexual function. What does that look like for an individual? Is this chronic illness? Is this hypertension? Is this what does this look like?
It's everything. It's everything. You're not thinking clearly. Your blood sugar is dysregulated. You have more diabetes, insulin resistance. Certainly, your sexual function is impaired. Your vision isn't as clear. All those little microcapillaries in your eyes feeding your eyes for vision. Your kidneys aren't working as well. The lungs aren't working as well. Your brain, it touches everything.
Everything. So then what you've just described as someone who has depleted nitric oxide levels sounds very much like basic aging. It sounds very much like your eyes
Exactly.
go, then this goes, and you're aching, and then, so all of that. So talk to me a little bit about, because I know it's hard for people to understand that as we age, there's just certain things that are going to happen, right? And our body's ability to create nitric oxide as we age, it just starts to decrease some. So
Right.
one thing, if that's how we're aging, if that's kind of how you can tell somebody's age by looking at their blood vessels, then how can you stave off some of that process? And how can you deal with the fact that, okay, my body's going to naturally decrease in its ability to make nitric oxide? What can be done naturally to just kind of
Right.
boost it?
By the time we're 40, our ability to make nitric oxide through this one pathway, through the arginine NOS, nitric oxide synthase pathway, decreases to about 50%. And by the time we're 60, that pathway is only functioning at 15%.
15, not 50%,
15.
50%. So
So
that's
that's why cardiovascular disease is rampant, as we age. Us women can hold on to that ability a little better until we reach menopause, because
Ooh.
these hormones actually affect that NOS enzyme. But once we reach menopause, we kind of even out with the men.
So the NOS enzyme is what is 100% necessary using that one pathway to actually create nitric oxide. And so as we age, that NOS actually decreases. But the cool part is, as women, we get to hang on to the ability a little longer than
A
gentlemen
little
do.
longer than men, right?
At what point does it usually hit on an average where we held on to it, menopause hits, and is it
And then
70? Yeah. Or is it menopause
no,
usually?
no, it's menopause.
It's
So
menopause.
whenever that happens. However, there's another pathway we can make nitric oxide. We make it through two different pathways. One is using the amino acid arginine through that NOS enzyme to make nitric oxide. And the other is through the nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway. So this pathway doesn't decrease with age.
Okay, so we got a pathway that we can boost up. Now, we can't boost
Right.
the other one as much, but we can boost this pathway up, the nitrate pathway. And what are some things that we can do naturally to make sure that that pathway is one running right? Because even if you're trying to do all these things to support it, there are some things that could potentially throw that pathway off. What are some things that could potentially throw this pathway off, as a matter of fact?
The beautiful thing about that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway, it actually helps recouple that NOS enzyme. It makes that NOS enzyme work better, in addition to making the nitric oxide too. So nitrates, we can consume the nitrates, high nitrate veggies, arugula, spinach, butter lettuce, bok choy, celery, beets. All of these are high nitrate veggies, and we can up the consumption of those.
Okay, now, guys, I want you to know, and she's going to tell us about this too, because not all vegetables are the same, you know, not everything. As a matter of fact, if we're buying organic, which we're trying to avoid glyphosate and everything else that can be in non-organic vegetables, but if we focus on that, then is it fairly true to say that since we're not using any nitrate-based fertilizer, that some of those great veggies might not even have the nitrate count that we want it to, correct?
Right. They might not. And different vegetables grown in different environments, like the vegetables we grow in Texas have different nitrate concentration than the vegetables they grow in the eastern United States or the western United States.
Interesting. So which part of the United States has the most nitrate-rich vegetables?
The western United States and middle United States.
Yes. And those are likely ones that are not organic. Is that correct?
Well, that just depends.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that
Western
depends. But
essentially.
you're right about the organic vegetables might not have as much nitrate concentration as the inorganic. However, but then they're loaded with all these other pesticides and glyphosates. And glyphosates is actually one of the things that shuts down that NOS enzyme. So that's
Okay, so,
actually,
so besides basic aging, we have some things that we encounter on a daily basis that can knock out that NOS enzyme and make it so that that first pathway doesn't even work right. So what are some of the other things besides the glyphosate?
stress is the biggest
Ooh,
one.
stress.
Stress. Okay, lack of exercise.
Okay,
The
so
standard American diet, the SAD, medications like antibiotics, antifungals, antidepressants, the SSRIs, birth control pills. So that's why they don't like women over the age of 35 or women with any like smokers or any cardiovascular disease doing birth control pills is because of that decrease in nitric oxide.
oh my goodness. So you have essentially, okay, so here it is. All these years, are you a smoker? You know, we ask that as a physician. You know, we're not going to put you on birth control pills if you are. You have essentially made the connection between why birth control pills can add a blood clotting risk to
Stroke risk.
to stroke risk because it's depleting the nitric oxide that should be there to expand and contract the blood flow and keep and contract expand these blood vessels to get the blood flow going to where it needs to go. Now you've interfered with it because you're
Right,
not getting enough nitric oxide
right.
production. Whoa.
And NSAIDs, your ibuprofen, your Aleve,
Wow.
PPIs, proton pump inhibitors.
So the two most popular over-the-counter things, the
PPIs,
non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, so the
inflammatories,
Advils, the Aleves, the ibuprofen,
right,
and the Prilosec, and the things that
right.
are, oh my goodness. So,
And
okay.
and and like when these PPIs were first put on the market, the insurance only paid for a 6-week supply. They
I
knew
remember.
what they were doing in the body. And in fact, they made like nitric oxide connected NSAIDs, nitric oxide molecule connected PPIs, because they knew this. Nobody's ever brought it to market, but they knew this. And so these PPIs used to be prescription, now they're over the counter. People have been taking them for decades.
Like candy. I can take someone off of the proton pump inhibitors and do some other things, and it's interesting. Erectile function will return sometimes
Yeah,
within days, actually. So it's really
amazing, huh?
really amazing. So, you know, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist. So I would love to hear your theory as to why they wouldn't put on market the healthier version, which couples some nitrates with the PPI. Well, I guess it makes sense, right? They want to get you
They want
addicted
to
to
get
it.
you sick and keep you sick.
Geez.
You're caught up in the big pharma model,
Sure. And
you know.
you having been a pharmacist and been in that space, and me
I've
being a
seen it.
physician and being in that space, I mean, when we make those statements, we're making them from experience. You know,
We are.
we were making it from. I never knew that PPIs, omeprazole, that they actually had a version which would help heal. You know.
Well, there's a patent. One of those companies have a patent. Okay.
Wow.
Same with the NSAIDs. They've got a nitric oxide molecule attached to an NSAID. They have a patent.
Wow. So basically, if the public ever did demand that they do better, they'd say, "Well, we got this. We might give them that if we need to." Wow.
Probably not.
Amazing. Probably
Yeah.
not. Probably
Yeah.
not. There's too much money. Listen, there's too much money in us being sick for
Exactly.
healing to really begin in these big spaces like big pharma. So I'm so glad that you're on the side, you know, of just trying to help people heal in the best way possible. So
Right.
you went through a lot of different ways that NOS can be uncoupled. And when we're talking about NOS being uncoupled, that's basically making, you know, let's just say it, annihilating your NOS, the enzyme that we need to make nitric oxide. What we're going through, what could potentially knock out that process right
Right. Um, and genetic SNPs too. I wanted to talk about this because if you have any MTHFR SNPs, you are by definition nitric oxide deficient, and that's about 40% of us right there.
And see, right here, we have part of what is the problem with healthcare in our country, where 40% of us are walking around with MTHFR genetic SNP, which means we are undermethylating. We'll talk about that another
Right.
day. But what that means then is that most people don't even know they have it because most insurance companies will not ever
They won't
pay
ever pay for that.
for us to get the test, which,
Right.
and then because people like you and I don't have these huge platforms to even talk about it, most people don't even know what an MTHFR is or what a SNP is. And so as a result of it, personalized medicine isn't something that's available to each and everybody. So when we say this, what we're saying is that if you have a chronic disease of any type, or you just things aren't going right, this should be one of the things that your doctor tests for, is whether you have an MTHFR SNP, which means that you would be undermethylating, which what is a quick way to describe undermethylating, Doc?
Things will not fit in receptors the way they should. You can't make your neurotransmitters. So you're not, you don't feel good. I mean, methylation touches everything too, even cancer. Methylation is pretty important.
It is absolutely, absolutely. So I think that's one thing that we don't talk about enough, are the undermethylators, and how many of us are undermethylating and don't even know it and haven't even heard of it. So, okay, so we've talked about all the different things that can actually uncouple NOS and make you unable to make nitric oxide efficiently. I think that a lot of people have this misconception that you can take a pill and it's nitric oxide. They'll tell me, "Doc, I've been taking nitric oxide for a while now." But nitric oxide is a gas that's made in the body, and the minute it's made, it kind of disappears and you're on to the next. So you want to have stores of the
Right,
material needed to make nitric oxide, right?
right,
Which are nitrates. So
right.
okay, so you've talked about one way to kind of boost nitric oxide production, which is to eat a lot of nitrate rich products. But you also mentioned that doing that, sometimes may not get you the same outcomes because, one, you might have something going on in your gut. You might be swishing around so much mouthwash that the bacteria isn't right. So you're not absorbing these things correctly or storing them correctly. What are some other ways that we know of that we can actually boost nitric oxide production?
Well, you can take a clinically proven nitrate supplement, but this nitrate to nitrite pathway is dependent on good bacteria in your oral cavity. So we've got good bacteria in your oral cavity that will reduce that nitrate to nitrite. So if you've got dysbiosis of the gut, more than likely you've got dysbiosis of your oral cavity.
So now dysbiosis is a fancy word for leaky gut. Basically,
Right.
what that means is that over time you have developed these spaces in the lining of your gut, and so when you're eating, it's supposed to be absorbed properly and go through the right process. What happens when you have leaky gut is it actually the same things that you're eating is just leaking out into the
Leaking.
bloodstream and causing problems, chronic illness, autoimmune issues, diabetes, hypertension. We can
Arthritis.
arthritis. That's a huge one, right? And so what we're saying is that if you have leaky gut and that's going on, sometimes you can eat all these vegetables and not really see much of an impact because it's not being processed correctly because you don't have the right bacteria there to even activate the process. So that's why bacteria is so important, right? That's why we try to make sure that people understand, listen, you can't live your life taking antibiotics every other week for a sinus infection, right?
It takes over a year for your bacteria to replenish itself
It takes over a
after
year.
a round of antibiotics. But the beautiful thing about nitrate supplementation is nitrate will actually repair and prevent leaky gut even if you're taking an antibiotic. There's studies showing that if you increase nitrates and you're on an antibiotic, you won't get the leaky gut and you won't mess with your microbiome so badly. So continued nitrate supplementation supports the good bacteria in your gut, the good bacteria in your mouth, the good bacteria everywhere, your skin, your vagina, your brain, your urinary tract.
So
So
does the bacteria
nitrates,
eat nitrates?
it's called a prebiotic. Yes.
Prebiotic. So guys, you know what an antibiotic is. Antibiotic is like kills out the bacteria, right? And we need bacteria to survive. What a prebiotic does is feeds the good bacteria good food. And so that the bacteria are strong and able to do what they're supposed to do. It's funny, Doc, I often think of these bacteria in our body as almost like the powerhouse behind how the body runs. I think we used to debate, is it the heart, is it the brain? But I think after just learning and being and doing, I almost want to say it may be the bacteria that is dictating how our body thrives.
They speak to everything. Okay, and if they're not in balance, then you're going to have all these bad guys speaking kind of nasty things to all your cells instead of the good guys whispering healthy words, good things.
Sure. That we can think of this good bacteria almost as like our own protective vital force, that's there to protect us and make sure things are going smoothly. And if we're not giving it the right stuff or we're continuously wiping it out, it doesn't have a chance to do what it's supposed to do. And unfortunately, in everybody, it eventually catches up with you. I feel like, and you may, because you've been in this functional nutrition space for a long time, and focusing on hormones and focusing on nitric oxide production and just thriving in natural ways, do you feel as though eventually, you may cheat through it in your 20s, you may cheat through it in your 30s. Do you feel like having leaky gut, depleted nitric oxide, and bad bacteria overgrowth eventually is going to catch up with you at some point, even if you can cheat it a little while you're young?
You can usually cheat it a little while you're young. We have more reserve. But as we get older, and especially when we get to like that perimenopause time, the 30s and 40s, things, you can't cheat so much. Okay, you've got to pay attention. And same with men. Like men are getting sicker younger too. I mean, it's the environment we live in is so toxic. The EMFs, we're swimming in the sea of EMF.
Explain a little bit about what EMF is. What it's
Electromagnetic field. This is what we get from our phones, from Wi-Fi, from our computers. Okay, it's everywhere. These EMFs uncouple that NOS enzyme. And they have known that these EMFs cause cardiovascular disease, diabetes, insulin resistance since the 50s and 60s. They've known this.
They've known this since the 50s or 60s. So then is this kind of can we make the connection between EMF and 5G? And
Yes.
why, because I think now whenever anyone talks bad about 5G, I think there's a portion of us, I have a lot of family members that think it's just like conspiracy theories, hocus pocus, so on and so forth.
No,
One
no.
thing.
And in fact, this virus started in Wuhan. Wuhan was one of the first cities to implement 5G. And then it spread to Italy, 5G. And then when it first started in the United States, it was with the 5G cities.
Really?
So by like nitric oxide is part of our immune response. Nitric oxide helps fight these pathogens.
So what you're suggesting is not that the 5G was transmitting the virus. What you're saying is that 5G was wiping out the immune system by
Right.
wiping out our ability to make nitric oxide. And so the virus became rampant in cities where their nitric oxide production had been depleted, and their immune system was depleted in essence because of that, those electromagnetic field energy coming from the 5G, basically.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so you've named pretty much everything we do on a daily basis. We sit for work. We eat products. Most of us eat out all the time, and that's got glyphosate on it. I've got 3 screens up, 1 computer. I got lights. I got my phone. I got my Wi-Fi. I have 2 Wi-Fis. So what can we do? And what can we do to battle this thing? Because there's certain things we can control, but most of what you're talking about, some of it we just can't control. So with that being the case, what would be your prescription? And I'm not saying prescription in terms of write me one in medicine, because both of us have been in that space and we try to keep people off of medicine. But what would be your recommendation for somebody who is feeling that all of the stuff that they are doing on a daily basis has run them down, and now they are ready to start the recovery process?
Support that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway, because this EMF increases what's called superoxide, which increases something called oxidative stress in inflammation. And there's an oxidative stress and inflammation component to every single chronic disease. That's at the base of all of our chronic issues. But supporting that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway actually downregulates the production of superoxide and oxidative stress.
So that superoxide, those free radicals and those things that
The
damage
free radical,
us, decrease.
yeah, they can't do the damage. They've been scavenged.
Yes. Awesome. So kind of what you're saying is really like having an amped up diet, because when you're saying nitrate nitrite pathway,
Right.
you're really talking about, but how much spinach, how much arugula, how much bok choy, how many beets, how much would it take to actually be in a space where you could be on a daily basis using food as your medicine to just combat superoxide?
Study shows that it takes 300 to 400 milligrams of nitrate to be a physiological dose. So to 400 milligrams of nitrate. So the DASH diet, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. This diet is used as medicine in cardiovascular disease. This diet supplies 12 to 1500 milligrams of nitrate per day.
Per day.
per day. So it's pretty challenging to get too much nitrate
Yes.
in our in our diet or even supplement wise, because
Sure.
that would be
I love that you said that. Doc, do you remember ORAC?
yeah.
Yes. So for those of you listening who, ORAC was actually a way that they had come up with to try to measure the amount of antioxidants in different food items, right? So what they would do is they would take, and you probably know more about this than I do, Doc, but they would just like basically take free radicals and see how easily different food items could combat them, and then they would give them an ORAC value. And when I first heard about ORAC, I was so excited. I was like, oh boy, we're going to be able to use food as medicine because we can quantify how powerful each bite of spinach would be for someone. And then they discredited it and basically said it was not useful and is probably not true at all. But when you're talking about how much food we would have to eat on a daily basis, when most of us really, most people, especially in America, don't really even like vegetables in the first place. They think that it's like the garnish that you barely want to eat. That's a really difficult thing, which is,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, how are you going to do that?
Well, to get 300 to 400 milligrams of nitrate, that's 5 ounces of spinach or 7 ounces of beets. So that's a pretty big salad there.
That's actually one of my smoothie recipes. Like if we got the blacker the berries smoothie
Yeah.
recipe, and it has like 145 milligrams of nitrates in it, right? Because I
Right.
think at the end of the day, it's like with kids, or if you have someone in your family who just totally doesn't want to eat any vegetables, you got to try to stick them wherever you can stick them.
Right.
But I also love supplements. It's
Mhm.
kind of like omega-3s. I mean, you can't possibly eat that much salmon, to get your omega-3s in. So talk to me about what to look for when someone is looking for a quality supplement that's going to support nitrate to nitrite pathway that isn't going to end you up in trouble.
Right. So I'm not a fan of the arginine citrulline products for nitric oxide.
This
Okay.
is the amazing doctor who taught me about why the L-arginine can potentially be a disaster. And do you know, we haven't spoken since you've told me that, but since I put that information out there, I have gotten at least 10 emails from guys who stopped their arginine supplements and just are feeling better. And
Yeah.
and their erections came back. They felt like maybe the arginine was part of the problem. Can you tell us what can potentially be so damaging about supplementing arginine over time?
Well, arginine is part of that NOS enzyme to make nitric oxide. However, remember I said that NOS enzyme is not functioning very well. It's only 50% by the time we're 40, 15% by the time we're 60. And if you have any chronic issue, it's going to be even less younger. So arginine has different pathways that can go down, not just that NOS pathway. And one of them is to ADMA, asymmetric dimethylarginine, which is this molecule is really high in diabetes, insulin resistance. It's actually connected to all-cause mortality.
So
So,
potentially, if you're taking L-arginine and your body can't use it, it is going to turn it into ADMA, which is
or ammonia,
or ammonia
or urea,
or urea.
which can harm the kidneys.
3 things that are extremely toxic to the body and to
Right.
cells. Wow. So okay. So you know.
So most of the studies that were done showing arginine increases nitric oxide were done on young, fit male athletes when their NOS enzyme is functioning correctly. And if you're a young, fit male athlete, you're probably not eating a lot of junk.
I love that. So the best supplement is not going to have arginine in it. What about citrulline? Is it going to have citrulline
Well,
in it?
citrulline is a little better than arginine because the cell doesn't even use arginine to fit in that NOS enzyme. It will use citrulline to make its own arginine to go into the NOS enzyme. However, you're still trying to make that dysfunctional uncoupled NOS work, and it's just not going to.
Sure. Okay. So those aren't going to be in it. That if you have your dithers, you would not pick a supplement that had either one of those in it. And I'm telling my audience this because you've got to think about quality. So if we don't want those in it, what do we
Right.
want in it? What should we look? What should we look for in terms of ingredients?
You should look for something like potassium nitrate. Okay.
Okay. Now let's talk about potassium nitrate. I think potassium nitrate, saltpeter, it's been around for years. The question I get a lot of times is, well, doc, okay, you're talking about doing nitrates. What about a hot dog that's been cured? It's high in nitrate. Is that going to help?
Actually, it doesn't have that much nitrate in it. So our vegetables are actually our main source of nitrates. And this issue with cured foods complexing with amino acids to make nitrosamines and cause cancer, this was done in the lab. This is not in real life. And in fact, in 1972, they made sure that all these cured meats with the nitrates and nitrites, that they had to add like either a vitamin C molecule or a vitamin E molecule, an antioxidant. That's all it takes to add to these nitrates or nitrites, and they will not form the nitrosamines.
Got it. I love that. So basically, the nitrosamine is what we are trying to avoid. Nitrosamine is taking a nitrate and combining it with an amino acid.
Right.
Correct? And so once there's an antioxidant in that space, there's no.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So there's no risk there.
In
Awesome.
fact, in all of these cured foods, where they say no nitrates or nitrates added, they've used celery seed. Celery seed has more nitrates and nitrites in them than if you just would have added 10 milligrams of nitrate or nitrite to the hot dog.
Got it. So then is celery seed more nitrate rich than like a beetroot or a
Yes.
red spinach powder? Or...
Yes.
Wow. Celery seed, there it is. And so celery seeds, but versus celeries. So
celery is high in nitrates too.
Yes. Is it higher in nitrate content than the beets? Because I think beets have kind of taken the spotlight here.
They've taken the spotlight, however, it's higher than beets. Arugula is the highest nitrate vegetable. Without any issue of oxalate. Some of those high nitrate veggies have people who have oxalate issues. It might not be the best choice for them. But arugula, high nitrate, low oxalate.
So let's pause on that oxalate issue. So oxalate issues is going to be a problem for anyone with any form of arthritis, right? Because the oxalate can actually deposit into the joints and make arthritic issues worse. So for instance, if you're taking in and eating a bunch of beets suddenly and now you're starting to feel achy, that could potentially be
that's an oxalate issue. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So what are some other signs that
kidney stones?
Yes, kidney stones, renal stones. Yes, kidney issues even. So that's something that people need to be mindful of, is whether or not they have an oxalate issue, and if they're feeding it with high oxalate containing products like beetroots. What are some other ones that might?
Spinach, really high oxalate. And I noticed that when all these green drinks started to populate everybody's diets, they're throwing handfuls of spinach in their green drinks and thinking that they were doing their body good, and a few weeks later, oh, my joints hurt, my kidneys hurt, the oxalate, if you search and look at what oxalate looks like, it's a really sharp molecule, So when it gets inside the cells, I mean, it's gonna hurt.
Sure, definitely. Okay, so someone's watching this and listening who has been having an oxalate issue. They have been drinking the beet juice. They have been, trying to boost nitric oxide production, but in the process, they've actually caused some issues with oxalate. What would be your recommendation? What's a nice way to try to detox from your oxalate issue?
Well, you that's a whole nother
Yes,
story. You
sure.
can't just stop. You've got to like cut down gradually, because there's some people that have um, like they're expelling oxalates from their cells, which causes even more problems initially. But if you're doing like a potassium nitrate supplement,
You don't have to worry.
you don't have those oxalate issues, and you're supporting that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway. I eat arugula a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Arugula is really healthy, and it's got lots of nitrates and no oxalates.
And magnesium too. Doesn't
Yeah.
arugula is really rich in magnesium, which
Minerals. Yeah.
most of us are missing on a
And
daily
it is
basis.
kind of on the more bitter um, pathway, and our bodies actually need that bitter to counteract all this sweetness that we're getting everywhere.
I never even thought of it like that, but absolutely. I mean, it almost has like a mustardy taste. It's
Hmm.
kind of got a
More of a
bitter.
stringent, yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so talk to me about what potassium nitrate is, because I had this conversation where I said, yeah, this is a potassium nitrate based supplement, and and it's great, and so on and so forth. Well, they're like, well, doc, if the potassium nitrate is made in a lab and the medication is
It
made in a
is.
lab, then
It is.
what is the difference? But you do a really great job talking about potassium nitrate, because you're basically saying, and maybe you say it, because nobody says it quite like Dr. Beth. So what makes potassium? What is potassium nitrate, and why would it be okay to take it if it's made in the lab?
Our body uses it to funnel that pathway. So to funnel that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway. So with that oral good bacteria in our mouth that reduce the nitrate to nitrite, we swallow the nitrite. In the acidic environment of the stomach, some of that nitrite is reduced further to nitric oxide, and here is your protection against H. pylori, your protection against E. coli. So that's why one of the reasons those PPIs are so destructive. You don't have the protection against some of these pathogens. But most of the nitrite gets absorbed, and it acts like a nitric oxide donor molecule, like in the muscle when we're exercising. And these cells need more glucose, oxygen, and nutrients. The myoglobin can reduce that nitrite to nitric oxide on an as-needed basis to open up that circulation and to clear away the debris that those cells are making. The electron transport chain in our mitochondria, our little energy-producing organelles, they make a lot of superoxide, increasing that oxidative stress.
Sure. When you think about mitochondria, everybody, I want you to think about mitochondria as like an engine and a powerhouse. It has to work really hard to get the job done. But just like your car, or just like any engine, there's going to be some byproduct of it, right?
Right.
And so the byproduct that these wonderful mitochondria make is actually damaging to the cell. So the harder
And
they work, the more potential damage you could actually
right.
play.
And nitrite helps recouple that electron transport chain. So it's helping you to make your ATP.
ATP
So
is the
when
power that the
our
mitochondria makes.
the energy molecule, right?
Yes.
And so and here's another place where that EMF comes in. It uncouples that electron transport chain. It decreases our ability to make that ATP. So by supporting that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway, you recouple it so it allows that mitochondria to produce the ATP for energy.
Okay, so I just had a new analogy or a simile. Like if you're thinking about nitric oxide production and nitrates, and or potassium nitrate, you could almost compare it to like the spinach that Popeye would eat. Like because
Mhm.
Popeye go and he gets depleted, so on forth. He'd get that spinach, he'd get that nitrate, and before you know it, he was powerful and could fight.
Mhm.
But it didn't last for forever. It would just lasted
Right.
for a few minutes and then he was back to normal. So what supplementing could potentially do is give your body the ability
Longer.
on a daily basis to just have that
Right.
energy it needs to fight off all of this.
Right. Because nitric oxide only has a half-life of less than a second. Okay. But nitrate has a half-life of 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
So a lot of times I like people to do their supplements in the morning and then add some high nitrate veggies at lunch and at dinner to help keep that level constant, keep that level up.
I love it. So tell me this. So I've got I'm always asking the guys, so how do you like your supplement? How's it going? And some of them are like, oh, fantastic. I could feel the difference immediately. So I think in this day and age, we assume that healing should happen super fast, just like Amazon delivery does, right? Can you talk a little bit about how this by supplementing your nitrates, how it is a process and how it's kind of a gradual thing, and not everybody is going to experience a major shift within a day or so of taking a supplement.
Although some people
Some
will
do.
feel it
Oh yeah, definitely.
because for one thing, you're increasing that circulation and microcirculation in your brain. So you can think better. But
More
same
alert.
with yeah, same with our sexual function.
Yes.
However, it all depends on what's going on underneath all of this and how much repair the body has to do.
That's right. That's right.
And what else are you doing in your environment, in your lifestyle to help this?
That's right. That's
To
right.
help like decrease the oxidative stress? Are you turning off your Wi-Fi at night? Okay. Are you not holding that phone up to your head? Are
Right.
you eating better? Are you exercising better?
Sure.
Are you doing something about that stress level? Because remember I said stress is one of the hugest factors for that NOS enzyme to not function correctly. And stress influences our microbiomes too. So it's going to be influencing our microbiome in our mouth.
So it kills off, stress kills off good bacteria. We used to say stress kills, and, like in medical school, it was kind of like, oh, it used to be a send off, kind of like, oh, we don't know what's wrong. It's probably just stress, but now science is very
It's
clear.
showing that it
Stress,
is true.
stress will
Yeah.
kill you, literally.
So
Yeah.
cortisol, the stress hormone, it's called catabolic hormone. It breaks down muscle, skin, bone. Okay, because it's getting you ready for that fight flight. So your body cannot repair when you're stressed. Your body cannot make that nitric oxide to keep that circulation open in order for you to repair. We
Now,
repair.
you're basically saying that literally stress will break you down. Like literally, it'll break your cells down, it'll break your organs
Muscles
down,
down,
break your
your
roots.
bones down, your brain down. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Doc, tell me this. So after the virus, I have a number of guys who, come to me and they're like, I was fine before the virus. I got it, and now I can't get an erection. I can't keep an erection. And they'll say everything else seems to have come back, but that one thing can't and doesn't. Can you talk a little bit about why that's happening to so many people? And then, what's the solution?
Well, it's not just the virus either, it's the shots. So in
Ah,
the shots, they've got the spike protein, and it's a spike protein. So a lot of the factors that go into making you more susceptible to the virus are nitric oxide deficient states. And then that spike protein actually makes that nitric oxide deficiency even worse.
So you're doubling
So
the
unless you support your body to put that nitric oxide back, your circulation and microcirculation is going to be impaired. And when that's impaired, you can't get an erection. Us women, we cannot feel down there. We can't respond. Lubrication is nitric oxide mediated. So, as women, if we can't feel or we can't respond and we're not lubricated, do you think we even think about sex? Probably not so much.
No, absolutely not.
So there's been some studies within the last year showing that sexual dysfunction is rampant after the virus. But then I was just at a conference, a 3-day conference. We were talking about how we were going to help the people after all these shots. And a spike protein from the shots is actually causing sexual dysfunction too.
So what at the conference, what did we come away with? What can help take someone who has had 3 or 4 of those and just realizes now, you know what? I'm off. Nothing's working like it used to, or someone who's had the virus and they're like, you know what, I'm off, or who's had both. We all know people who've had that and the virus itself. Do you think that recovery starts with supplementing?
Starts with nitric oxide. You will not heal without improving that circulation and microcirculation. Okay, so with this spike protein, our nitric oxide is trying to help us. It can scavenge the damage that the spike protein is doing, but then it takes the nitric oxide out of circulation from doing all these other good things.
So that's ultimately how you end up with it being depleted, is it because the nitric oxide is being called in so many places that your body just can't keep
to scavenge the damage that the spike protein is doing, right?
Do you think that the spike protein, does this spike protein just going to stick around, or is it time sensitive? Like, does the spike protein going to go away?
We don't know. We don't know.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's a mRNA.
Because see, what we're just talking about here, we're just talking about the erection. Well, what we can't get away from talking about is the fact that microcirculation and circulation affects everything from your brain to your heart to your kidneys to your joints, every single thing. So
your skin.
Yeah, your skin, definitely. We've all seen people who just aged significantly in the past year and a half.
Past year, yeah.
Wow. So basically, if you're experiencing any of the things that we've talked about, nitric oxide supplementation, supplementing your body's ability to make nitric oxide using a nitrate-based supplement, or even the nitrite or nitrate, would you say? But nitrate gets you quicker results, is really a good place to start this healing process. But I think, Dr. Beth, you said it perfectly when you said, listen, you got to worry about the other stuff that you're doing too. You cannot expect that there's one magic pill, magic supplement, or magic anything. You kind of have to do the work to really, really start to heal. And sometimes healing is not a prescription medication. It can be food. Let food be thy medicine. And potassium nitrate is a lab created version of what plants are manifesting. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you're basically eating a plant. It's not plant based, but it's based on a plant.
It is. Yes, and it has like the same amount of nitrates in it as like 5 ounces of spinach or 7 ounces of beets.
So you can get it in a capsule without necessarily having to, because too, I find that vegetables have got shot through the roof. So if you are eating that many vegetables, that much arugula is expensive, that much arugula on a daily basis, that actually becomes kind of cost prohibitive, and it's hard to find. Most restaurants don't even carry arugula these days.
So supporting that nitrate to nitrite to nitric oxide pathway is the base of healing. It is how we heal. So stem cells are how the body heals, but also stem cells are becoming really popular in the
Yes,
alternative medicine field
sure.
for healing, like joints and muscles and things like that.
Stem cells and PRP, plasma rich protein.
Right. However, nitric oxide is essential for stem cells to know what to do, to go where they need to go and do what they need to do, because they're kind of generic when in our body and when they're given to us. But nitric oxide helps them to know where to go. Okay, this place needs healing. You know, even when you get a cut or something, you know, the stem cells is how you repair from that.
Mhm.
So they come from your bone marrow. But they've got to have nitric oxide in order to know where to go and what to do.
It's interesting because I think, having done stem cell injections and PRP and everything, you have a subset of people that, wow, it's amazing. It just worked like magic. They're feeling better. Then you have a subset of people who
Who
really
doesn't work,
nothing, crickets,
right?
right?
And it's
So
expensive.
it's expensive, and it is expensive. It's terrible to look in the eye of a patient who invested that much money in something and it didn't work. But what I'm learning now, it's the same thing with Viagra and all those things. Like they take it, it stops working. Usually it is because they are nitric
Nitric
oxide
oxide
depleted
deficient.
and
Really,
can't.
with all these PDE5 inhibitors, the Viagra, the Cialis, you've got to have enough nitric oxide on board in order for those to work. So that's why they don't work in about 50% of the people,
50%.
because they allow that nitric oxide to hang around longer. But they've got to have nitric oxide there in order for them to work. They don't cause the erection. They allow that erection to hang around longer.
It's like having a party and nobody shows up. You got all the drinks, you got the music, you got the DJ, you've got this amazing space,
You
so
got the
that you pop that. Yeah,
candles.
that's right. You pop a pill and you pop some Viagra and nothing happens. No magic, nobody shows up. Well, that's why the nitric oxide never made it there. So it can't hang around for the after party. It is just not present. That's amazing. I mean, so we've covered really pretty much kind of the toxins and how your body can shut down basically because of them. We've talked about EMF. We've talked about really what happens when your nitric oxide depleted, and we talked about some natural ways to boost nitric oxide production. We also talked about that the majority of us are going to need some form of nitric oxide supplement because it's really hard to intake as much nitrate and nitrite content as you could potentially do. And sometimes it's just easier to take a supplement to get to that. I always say you either got to get the supplement or you got to get my smoothie recipes or both, right? Because even what you're saying is start out with the supplement and by lunchtime, maybe you've done a little intermittent fast and lunchtime is your first meal of the day, then you want to follow that with some nitrate rich
Veggies.
veggies.
Now,
So, yeah.
I want to talk just a little bit too about blood sugar.
Yes, please.
Diabetes and insulin resistance are nitric oxide deficient states. So there's this receptor on our cell called the GLUT4 receptor, and it requires nitric oxide in order to bring the glucose into the cell.
Yes.
So when you've got high blood sugar, you are nitric oxide deficient. Hemoglobin A1C, the measure of what our blood sugar's been doing for the last 3 months, it can bind tightly to nitric oxide. However, then this takes that nitric oxide out of circulation for keeping your cardiovascular system healthy.
So basically, the hemoglobin A1C can bind up with your nitric oxide, but then it's basically using nitric oxide, and the heart can't use it.
Right. And so the higher the hemoglobin A1C, the worse you are on nitric oxide. So when you have diabetes or insulin resistance, what gets you is not necessarily that, it's actually the cardiovascular complications. It's the nitric oxide deficient part.
So, Doc, I think one of the things that we're consistently looking at is renal function or kidney function in our
Mm-hmm.
diabetes. So,
Right.
what you're saying then is that because the hemoglobin A1C is kind of eating up most of our nitric oxide, then there's not enough nitric oxide there to have amazing blood flow to the kidneys, amazing
Right.
blood flow to the brain, amazing blood flow to the eyes.
Yes.
Got
So
it.
that's where the complications are
That's where they
with high glucose, high blood sugar. And high blood sugar too causes a lot of oxidative stress. Oxidative stress uncouples that NOS,
and
increasing more oxidative stress.
make nitric oxide and make more oxidative stress. So we can take that one step further because this NOS that we're talking about, we've been talking about it mostly in terms of blood vessels, but also there's NOS in nerve terminals and nerves, right? So
Right.
is in our diabetics, is the nitric oxide depletion a part of peripheral neuropathy as well?
Yes. It's a nitric oxide deficient state. Yes.
Okay.
Because not only like these nerves have to be fed by these microcapillaries. And if they're not fed by an open microcapillary, you've got trouble. They can't function.
Even our
There's
nerves
pain.
need blood. Even our nerves need blood supply. And as you can imagine, the blood supply to the nerves are teeny tiny. Those would be
Yes.
some of the first ones to go, right?
Yes.
The tiny blood vessels. So nitric oxide is depleted in diabetics, particularly your nitric oxide is depleted if your hemoglobin A1C is above 6. You've got to know that. So then you probably 100% feel as though every diabetic patient, most diabetic patients should consider supplementing nitric oxide production,
And
if
insulin
nothing
resistant.
else. Yes. Oh,
Okay.
so even those who are pre-diabetic, metabolic syndrome,
Right.
are just, your doctor told you, yeah, you're borderline. Even you should be considering nitric oxide supplementation. Wow. Wow. So we've talked about perimenopausal women needing to supplement nitric oxide production. We've talked about men, whether they have chronic disease or not, needing to supplement nitric oxide production. So then would it be adequate to say that the only people who really kind of don't even need to think about this would be the 20-year-olds and under? Is that
Yeah, but now we're seeing younger and younger people with cardiovascular disease.
that's true.
And now with all the
Depleted.
shots in these kids, you've got to take care of your circulation.
Yes. You have to take care of your circle. You're right. We see sick kids all the time. Wow. This has been such an enlightening conversation with you, Doc. So I think the first 5 minutes or so, I didn't get a chance to get recorded. So what I would love to do is just kind of reintroduce you again,
Okay.
and then we'll just splice it at the beginning of it.
Okay.
Okay. So I am so excited today because today I get the opportunity to share with you a scientist that I personally check in with regularly. And you may have listened to me when I said, "Hey, hold on, everybody, hold off on taking all your arginine because I've got some information from you." Well, this is the young lady who taught it to me, and she is such an amazing brain. Okay, so besides being a brain, she's a great person. She used to be kind of, just a traditional pharmacist. And she realized we kind of have very similar backgrounds. She realized she wasn't really serving anybody. It wasn't really healing. We got caught up in that big pharma space. And someday you wake up and say, listen, this is not what I thought I was going to med school or pharmacy school for. So then she went and became a clinical nutritionist. and a functional medicine practitioner. She's an expert on hormone production, autoimmune, gut issues, and my favorite topic, nitric oxide production. She has actually been involved in creating some of the most amazing supplements for nitric oxide supplementation. She is my go-to for any question I have about not just nitric oxide, but really just about the way the body functions. She knows it inside out, and she's a fireball, and it is such an honor to introduce you to Dr. Elizabeth Shirley. I'm your biggest fan. I like stalk anytime you're doing a presentation. I'm like rewinding it. And I think the coolest thing about it is I'm always taking notes. You give such good, amazing takeaways. And my audience has been thriving because of this connection that we have with each other. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Doc, this is so much fun. And you are such like an encyclopedia of information. I learn something new literally every time, either it's a text or a talk or even this. I just keep learning, and you just keep giving. And, you're healing through your words and through your knowledge. So I just really appreciate you.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm working on a presentation, methylene blue and nitric oxide. There's so much misinformation about it. So do you know about methylene blue?
Not really, not in the sense of worry.
Well, methylene blue supports mitochondrial health. So it can be an electron donor or electron acceptor. So it helps recouple that mitochondria. It's actually the very first prescription medication. And in fact, get this, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine came from methylene blue. Okay. But some guy wrote a book about methylene blue and how methylene blue downregulates the production of nitric oxide. So since then, we've had like a bunch of practitioners, they used to buy a lot, and they're not buying so much anymore because their patients want to take the methylene blue, and why should they support the nitric oxide if they're taking methylene blue? Well, it's a bunch of malarkey.
So it's not even
So
true.
methylene blue actually supports that NNOS, the neural NOS. Okay? And methylene blue can help that nitrite to nitric oxide production within the mitochondria. So they go really well together.
Got it.
So I'm going to be dispelling some more myths.
So then if he wrote a whole book on it, was he confused was he taking endothelial NOS?
Well, actually, methylene blue does downregulate a NOS, but it downregulates an upregulated iNOS.
iNOS.
Okay. So iNOS, inducible NOS, that's what gets upregulated with all this inflammation, environmental toxins, and stuff like that. Okay.
So he's not differentiating between.
He's not differentiating.
NOS.
Yeah.
Now, is that because it just doesn't, you feel like he just
Most people aren't not nitric oxide researchers.
Got it.
Okay. And so they just maybe read a study or two here or there, and they just go on assumptions.
That is so cool. So how many nitric oxide researchers would you say there are like in the United States? Because I'm sure you all know each other.
Not very many. Not very many.
So it's such a powerful thing. Like it's
amazing. But see, I think part of the reason is because it does so many things that people cannot fathom, that by supporting just this one process, that it helps everything. Because they're so used to like a pill for every ill. Okay, they're so used to like, I've got this one symptom, I'm going to take a pill. Okay, that they don't understand that it touches everything.
Wow, and you summed it up with such a great statement, because I feel like when I talk to people about nitric oxide production, unless it's like my mom and she kind of believes everything I say, they're still kind of finish the conversation like, okay, well, you've said all that, but why do I need to take it again? And
Exactly. They didn't really hardly even hear what you had to say.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So we're gonna spoon feed it to them. So I'm gonna release the video in full length, but I think what's gonna get people thinking are the little nuggets, the little snips that we'll release, to just kind of get people thinking, oh, okay, well, what more can I learn about it, and just kind of
Yep.
pique their interest. Because I think the piece, particularly, African American community, I mean, we have all the chronic illnesses and diseases, we get it more
Well,
than
you,
everyone else.
yeah, you can't make your nitric oxide even worse than us white folk. You can't. You guys have a hard time. I mean, that's
Really?
why your cardiovascular disease is worse. That's why your diabetes and your insulin resistance is worse, is because you've got that impaired NOS
It's
genetically.
it's funny because I have been down the vitamin D pathway. I've been down the omega-3 pathway. I've been down the food pathway, trying to figure out why is it that as a community we just sicker than everybody else, and we all
Well,
have
even
those.
Dr. Nathan Bryan is a nitric oxide researcher. He's the
Yes.
one that made the Neo 40 lozenge and has his own product now. He has a phase 3 clinical trial for nitric oxide in Black COVID patients.
And he's basically showing that it was depleted. And
Yeah,
then he's showing how once they get the
because
nitric oxide.
because the blacks were more prone to get it to begin with, and they had a harder time recovering. So by using his nitric oxide lozenge, it's actually helping them recover better.
Oh, I love that. I love that. There was a study that showed that if the higher the melatonin levels of African Americans when they contracted COVID, the less likely they were to be hospitalized and have a hard time.
Well,
Is that is that
in
because the
April of
melatonin?
20, yeah, in April of 2020, I put out my first paper and first webinar on nitric oxide and this virus. And I suggested vitamin C, melatonin, and nitric oxide support.
That alone, that cocktail would have just saved so many people.
It would have. Hmm. I
And were
put it
you,
out in April 2020.
wow. So when we're talking about the melatonin, is it because melatonin is like the super antioxidant?
Antioxidant.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And
But
so
you need high doses.
you need high doses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whenever somebody would talk to me and stuff, I'd put them on 70 to 80 milligrams.
Wow.
And now, the melatonin researcher is actually even saying mega doses, even more than
Even
that.
more than that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But with like 10 grams of vitamin C, 80 milligrams of melatonin, and then the Berkeley, 2 capsules 3 times a day, it brought everybody out.
Wow. So tell me, why is it that African Americans have such a hard time making nitric oxide? What is it?
The, I think it's their NOS SNPs. They've got more NOS SNPs.
So we have more genetic SNPs that are having error printing out this recipe for making nitric oxide.
Making nitric oxide, yeah.
Do you have any ideas or any theories as to which part of the pathway is a problem? Is it the NOS production that's a problem? Is it
Right.
okay? So the
Hmm.
theory is that we have a harder time making nitric oxide synthase, which is NOS. And because of that, we aren't making nitric oxide at a capacity that we should, which explains why there's so much hypertension, right? Because
Kidney disease and
yes,
diabetes, yeah.
yes, yes, because
And
we're
then when you're on
not working.
dialysis, like through the first 2 passes, when you're on dialysis, it removes all the nitrate, nitrite. So you're actually compounding the cardiovascular complications.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So anybody going through dialysis certainly needs to be on nitric oxide support.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this is so cutting edge. This is so beyond what anyone's saying, because I think that, nitric oxide was discovered back in the 70s or 80s?
Well, they named it in the 90s.
In the
because they
90s.
used to call it endothelium relaxing factor.
Oh, that's
They
right.
didn't really know what it was.
Sure. And
Yeah.
so I'm guessing that it's going to take another 10 or 20 years for medicine, like practitioners like myself who just go through medical school and hang out a shingle and are trying to help. I would say it's going to be some years before we actually start to take nitric oxide production as seriously as we should. Do you agree?
I do, but also it comes back to money too, again, because a lot of these alternative practitioners are making a lot of money on all these supplements.
Sure.
Okay. But you need to give them the base first to allow what you're giving them to get where they need to go.
That's
You
right.
know?
That is so true.
And if you give them the base, then they might not need all of this other stuff.
Sure. And then if they didn't need all those other things, then the hospitals wouldn't be so big, and pharma
Yeah.
wouldn't be making so much money. And so I always say the medical system, the healthcare system, that gains
I don't
nothing
call
if you
it,
get well.
it's not a healthcare system.
No, they
Okay. It's a
gain.
disease.
It's a disease
Yes.
system. That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time, man. This has
You're
been
welcome.
the best hour of the year for me, to be honest. I
Oh,
mean, I have
good.
learned so much, and you just, you just keep shining. I really appreciate you, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
You too. I'll see you later.
Okay. See you later. Bye-bye.